The GameOverse is exactly what Glitch Productions need right now. Hello everybody, my name is the DynaGamer556, and today I'm going to be talking about Glitch Productions' new animated pilot, The GameOverse, and wow, did it knock my socks off. My expectations for the show were pretty low after seeing the trailer, and there wasn't that much hype for me coming up to it, and I wasn't that excited. But oh boy, after watching it, it might be my favorite pilot that has released right now. As much as I enjoy the Gaslight District's pilot and Murder Drone's pilot, man, did I just love this pilot so much. So I'm going to be talking a little about what I liked about the pilot, some of my thoughts on what I didn't really like about it, and of course, some overarching problems Glitch has had in general that I think this show finally addresses, and whether or not I think this is going to be the next big thing that Glitch talks about. So let's first talk about what I liked. Now, I think it goes without saying that the GameOverse's animation is absolutely stellar. It looks great the entire runtime, and I honestly really loved how it looks. I also think the voice acting was great. I've heard Jay Schlatt sing before, and he absolutely cooks as this little backpack fella. And honestly, none of the performances are bad at all. And I know I heard some people say they didn't like the dialogue, but the dialogue wasn't that bad for me. And I'm someone who has watched Has-Been Hotel, so I know what bad dialogue looks like. Trust me, this dialogue is not that bad. Another thing I like about GameOverse is already the endless possibilities for world building. I always like planet hopping, space type adventures because it adds literally endless possibilities for world building, and world building is my favorite aspect in a lot of shows and media. I also really enjoyed the characters here. I didn't really find any of them annoying, and I honestly liked all of them. I also like the action in this pilot as well. It doesn't suffer from the Amazing Digital Circus where absolutely nothing happens and it's boring the entire time. And it also doesn't suffer from Knights of Guinevere where it kind of just doesn't explain anything to you at all and is way too vague. But this pilot, although it does shove you right into the action, it does do a decent job of explaining everything well. And if there's one thing that the GameOverse does right, as at least with the pilot, that I think every other indie animation project that Glitch Productions has made so far hasn't done well, it's the villain. One thing I will say about every Glitch Productions show, even the ones which only have one episode, is they have a massive villain problem. Murder Drone's main antagonist is not seen in their full body form until episode 7, the second to last episode of the show. For the entirety of season 1, we are essentially dealing with Sin's lapdogs the entire time, and Sin herself doesn't even appear to do anything in the present timeline until episode 7. Think about Amazing Digital Circus. Kane is tormenting and, yes, an antagonist. He doesn't really take up the role as main antagonist of the show. I mean, he literally dies in the second to last episode. He's not a main antagonist. And from what we see from Gaslight District and Knights of Guinevere, we have really no idea who the main antagonist is going to be. Because if there's one thing the creators of these stories like to do, it's to make everything vague and never reveal anything to you and make everything a mystery, because everything needs to be a mystery. They can't just show you who the main villain is. Come on now, guys. This is the Big 26. This is peak writing. So one of my favorite aspects of GameOverse is that we literally just see the main antagonist of the show. This big guy, and honestly, he's pretty cool. I really like his design, and the syntax as a whole, I really like their name, number one, and the two lackeys, the paper guy, I forgot his name, and Misinformation, who is a baddie, I think they're very fun and very enjoyable and entertaining. I am so glad, and it is so refreshing to see a Glitch show that actually shows you who their main antagonist is, because as you guys should know by already, if you've watched my channel, it's that I love villains. I love main antagonists, and I love watching them on screen. So constantly wondering who the main villains of the show are going to be always ends up making me feel a little bitter, because even though characters like Sin are great, if they just actually gave her time in the show, she could have been a lot better. And I really feel like the villains of GameOverse can really sell that home. I mean, we have a main antagonist, but we have a lot of other side villains that we can also interact with as well, which I really like. There's the villains from Kit's Game, Paper Guy, Misinformation, Big Ol' Helmet Dude. I mean, there is so many possibilities for fights and antagonists, and I am super excited for it. I also like how action-packed this is. A lot of people say the pacing here is breakneck, but at the same time, would you rather have the pilot been paced like Amazing Digital Circus's pilot? I have made this clear many times, but I think the Amazing Digital Circus pilot is the weakest pilot Glitch Productions has released and probably will release. It is a far cry to how good the series gets towards the end, because although Amazing Digital Circus locks in, as I say, with episode 6, at the same time, the show is so boring in its first 2 episodes, and honestly, I'm really excited for GameOverse just because of how invested I was within this first episode. The animation is great, we finally have a main antagonist, and we get some epic fight scenes and, epic pacing. Now, before anyone says that, oh, you can't handle a show that's just dialogue for like an entire episode, I'll have you know that my favorite TV show of all time is ReZero, and ReZero is not one of those animes where they're just fighting constantly. It's not, and I didn't watch Jujutsu Kaisen just for the hype moments and fighting. It has an actual good and in-depth story when you actually get into it. At the end of the day, the reason why I like GameOverse so much was just because the characters spoke out to me a lot more, and I just enjoyed the pilot and it didn't bore me. At the end of the day, there's a lot of rom-com animes where nothing really happens that can still keep my attention. But unfortunately, Amazing Digital Circus just didn't do that, which is why I'm kind of fine with the series ending. Now, moving forward, is GameOverse what Glitch Productions needs right now? That is the question. That is the million-dollar question. Well, I do think the next show they're going to be focusing on is Gaslight District, which means it could be up to 2027 or 2028 before they even start releasing more episodes of GameOverse. I mean, it's been over a year since Gaslight District's pilot has released, and we haven't even gotten the second episode for it yet, as they have fully gone into Amazing Digital Circus. But that all depends on how GameOverse performs. It is still very early to tell this, but as you guys know, Knights of Guinevere and Gaslight District did not perform well, not well enough compared to their shows like Murder Drones and Amazing Digital Circus. So, what is next for Glitch Productions? And it, like I said, all depends on how good the GameOverse pilot does. It has been around 2 days since it released on Friday when I'm recording this video on Sunday the 17th. So it has gotten around 7.6 million views last time I checked. Is that good? I think so, if you ask me. I think it's pretty good for only being out less than 2 days, and it's already gotten over 7 million views. But at the same time, if they want to lock in with GameOverse, it's going to need to get a bit more views, because the Amazing Digital Circus set the bar high in terms of views with Glitch Productions, and Glitch Productions won't be getting as much money intake, which means they will have to slaughter their budget since Amazing Digital Circus is going to be ending soon. And that is what I fear. With Amazing Digital Circus ending, which is undoubtedly their best performing series sales-wise, means that they might not have a big enough budget to make the shows as good as they are. A lot of people are calling Glitch Productions greedy for doing this whole Amazing Digital Circus Theaters thing. But you also have to realize that they are funding 4 different shows at the moment. 4 shows that all have independent and different ways that they are animated, and 4 shows that all have different budgets. And with these budgets, they are going to need money to actually produce these shows. So the creators of Glitch wanting to ask for your support and money so the Amazing Digital Circus can go to theaters is not being greedy of them. In fact, it'll give us better shows. Because at the end of the day, some of the best parts of these shows are their incredibly expressive animation. But if they don't get enough money, then they won't be able to have the budget to make animation this good. And that's what worries me. Since Knights of Guinevere and Gaslight District did not perform nearly as well as Amazing Digital Circus, they will be getting a lot less money in, which means they might have a lower budget to work on stuff like GameOverse. But hey, maybe that's me just getting all worried over nothing. At the end of the day, I just think GameOverse is really good, and it really tickles that soft spot, that niche in my brain for a show that has endless possibilities for a story, a show that has a potential goated main antagonist, and a show that I just think looks amazing. So, if you guys want to see more videos about the GameOverse, then make sure to like and subscribe, because I talk about indie animation, I talk about anime a lot, and I talk about video games occasionally. And if you want to see more of me, then just hit that like and subscribe button to show me that you care and you are willing to support my channel. Anyway, I have been the DynaGamer556, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.